Welcome back to The Next Revolution. The late Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis was famous for promoting the idea of federalism. He liked to refer to the states as laboratories of democracy, where individual states could pioneer their own ideas on issues like education and welfare. But we seem to be heading in the exact opposite direction today. Government is getting more and more centralized in Washington, D.C. Now there's a new movement afoot that would give states more of a say when it comes to governing. Correspondent Anita Vogel explains.
It's adopted. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Cheers break out in the Texas legislature when it became one of 12 states to agree to take part in a convention of states, a movement to propose amendments to the Constitution. Imagine representatives from 50 states meeting the way the founding fathers did back in 1787.
I think it's the ultimate Super Bowl of American politics. Literally nothing like this has been done in American history.
Mark Meckler.
Mark Meckler is the president of the Convention of States Project. He's gone around the country promoting and educating people about a convention aimed at crafting proposals to shift power from the federal government back to the people. Some of the goals include reducing federal regulation, imposing term limits, and forcing a balanced budget.
So where does the notion of a convention of states even come from? Straight from Article 5 in the Constitution, which says the legislatures of 2/3 of the states shall call a convention for proposing amendments.
Article 5 was written into the Constitution because our founders were suspicious of the strong federal government seizing too much power, and they wanted to give an opportunity for the document to change.
But the idea is not without its high-profile detractors.
They want radical, pull them up by the roots change. They want to have a constitutional convention to rewrite our Constitution, to make it friendlier to business, to inject, religious and ideological elements.
In addition to Hillary Clinton, there is major opposition from almost every progressive group. A letter from Common Cause signed by more than 200 organizations, from labor unions to the Sierra Club, warning that such a convention would be dangerous for America. But legal experts point out the hurdles built into the Constitution should calm fears of radical changes.
38 out of 50 states would have to agree on whatever amendment was proposed out of the convention in order for it to be ratified.
Still, proponents remain optimistic. Mark Meckler says whenever he feels like the bar for change is too high, he imagines himself in a conversation with Ben Franklin.
I think he'd ask me this question. Well, Mr. Meckler, what about Article 5? Have you used Article 5? We gave it to you for this purpose. And when I sheepishly said, well, no, for 230 years we just haven't, I think he would dismiss me. And I think he would say, go do it, go try it, and let us know how it works out.
A total of 34 states need to agree to call a convention. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel for The Next Revolution.
Don't you love the way that all these progressive groups are dead against this? They're supposed to be for people power. There's no better example of it than this. Anyway, joining me now, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, Pete Hegseth. Pete, I'm so excited to talk to you about this because it's literally one of my real passions, the decentralization of power. You first put me onto this. You told me about the convention and what their aims are and how they're going about it. Tell us why you care about it so much.
Steve, this is what your show is all about. This is literally the next revolution without shots being fired. This is the people taking the power back from Washington and saying, if the federal government won't do it, then we will. And we will petition our state legislatures to make sure that we have a voice in our government. Right now, 12 states have passed it. Another 30 states, Steve, 30, have either passed it in their state legislature or are actively considering it. And that means you could call a constitutional convention in our time where you push to limit term limits, balanced budget amendment to limit the scope of the federal government, because you and I both know we can't count on bureaucrats in the federal government in the swamp to limit itself. It never will. It will always be the people who step up to say, we will take our government back. So I'm enthusiastic about this idea. It's early, but it's growing and it's building. And I'll tell you, as someone who gives speeches across the country all the time, I see grassroots conservatives dedicated to this movement, Convention of States, and committed to ensuring that it reigns in Washington, D.C. you're ahead of the curve, Steve. You're following this. This is a next revolution, and it is possible.
I totally agree with you, actually, Pete. After you told me about it, I mentioned it in one of my opinion pieces on foxnews.com and got a huge reaction. The thing I'm interested in is like that reaction from the left, particularly like Hillary Clinton there, going on about how outrageous this is. If I'm not mistaken, the Constitution itself specifies that everything that isn't in there that is given to the federal government to take care of should be handled at the state level. And we've gone so far away from that. This is actually part of the Constitution to return power to the states, isn't it?
Of course, Steve, and we shall be known by our enemies. And the fact that Hillary Clinton, on her book tour, decided to bring this issue up unprompted is a recognition that ultimately Convention of States is something the left sees as very threatening to their growth of government over the last 100 years. It's not just her, though. Over 200 groups, as you mentioned in the intro, have come together to fight against this movement. It means they recognize it's probably the one way in which conservatives can actually curtail government. Because as much as I support what the president has done on repealing the individual mandate, on the tax cuts that have been passed, on the regulations that have been rolled back, those are all very important. But ultimately, government continues to grow in size and scope, and we can't count on who the next commander-in-chief may be. So only the people can ultimately say, we'll rein this back, which is why George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and the left are so concerned about Convention of States. They want to kill it in the crib. And the reality is grassroots members, folks like yourself who see the possibility of it, realize that we have a constitutional republic. Our founders gave us Article 5. They passed this motion 2 days before the convention was closed to ensure that not just the federal government could say what's possible, but the states could come together and petition that federal government to change the Constitution. Why not now, Steve? Why not now when we see the growth of government so significantly choking the freedoms of individuals? I think now could be the moment. And you've got 12 states that have already passed it and over 24 considering it actively.
I completely agree, and you put it really well. I think that I'm pretty confident in saying that most of the people in our audience watching tonight will be on our side on this. What can they do to help make it happen? What specifically should people do to try and advance this cause?
This is the beauty of this. You can go to conventionofstates.com and learn about this organization. But as someone who's run grassroots groups in the past, it's difficult to motivate people because oftentimes you have this amorphous sense of what people can do. The reality is, if you want to save your country, you can lobby your state legislature. So go to that state rep, that state house, that state senator who you know well in your own backyard and say, hey, you want to save this country? Pass this bill through your committee, pass it through the state, have the governor sign it, and contribute to this cause. Because once a state passes it, it's a part of the number that would have to get to the majority to bring it before the entire country. It's the ultimate grassroots vehicle because it's a federal problem with a local solution. And for patriots who care about their country, you don't have to come talk to your senator in Washington, your congressman in Washington. You can go to your state legislature and push it. So it's the ultimate grassroots tool where the people meet the power and they actually can merge together to fix their country. So Convention of States is the name of the organization. The movement is in our Constitution, and your show is the perfect vehicle. So I'm so grateful for you, Steve, for being a part of it. I'm doing everything I can in my personal time to push this change because the bureaucrats are never going to do it. And programs like this and movements like this are what take the power back.
You said it, Pete. You're so right. We're going to make sure we put that address up for our audience to make sure they can take the practical steps you talk about. One other aspect of that I just want to mention is it's not just about the petitioning. It's also you've got to elect people who believe in this so that you've got the right kind of receptive audience
Absolutely.
in those state legislatures. And I think people often overlook the importance of those state legislative elections and only think about Congress, whereas the state level, it's so important. Pete, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And let's check in and see how the campaign's going. See you soon.
Sign the petition and get your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Our success depends on you. So we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.